fellow audio enthusiasts. It is I, Jason, your host of Two Channel Listening, back after a several-month hiatus as I moved my family across the United States to the somewhat Great Plains. I have for you today the long-awaited Dali Rubicon 2C active speaker review. I'm just going to get straight to the point. It is going to be an absolutely brutal review. Let's just dive right into it, shall we? So, my love affair started with the passive Rubicon 2s. I absolutely fell in love with the tonality of those speakers, especially that wood pulp fibrous cone woofer. It just had this warmth and this exceptional character that I have not heard from many other speakers that I've owned and tried over the years. And I would also say that the 29mm tweeter that Dali produces for that particular line is quite the sweetheart as well. It has a good amount of refinement and I would say a little bit of brightness, but I'm not a big fan of B&W or Focal, so it's not to that level of brightness, if you know what I mean. So because I liked that speaker so much, I have to say that I would hold the active version, the 2C version, in very high regard. And because of those regular passive version speakers, I thought the bar was going to be set this high, especially given that the price of entry for the active 2Cs with the Dali Sound Hub, that's a $6,900 proposition. So when I was able to buy a demo pair at a very good price from my good friends at the Music Room in Colorado, let's just say I was struck with a huge amount of anticipation, and again I had very high hopes for that 250 watt active speaker. The unboxing. Now, there's something to be said that when you have stand mount speakers of say $2,500 like the passive Rubicon 2s, that piano black I found very handsome. The aluminum drivers and the way that it was put together is a very handsome package, and again I really appreciated that higher end value proposition for that price point. And I would say that I found for around the $2,500 range, that was a good value proposition. Now, when you unbox a pair of $5,500 Rubicon 2 active speakers, that's actually the same exact dimensions, it's the exact same enclosure, and it's a vinyl wrap, it's a walnut vinyl wrap. Folks, I have to say, I was already in the disappointment department to start out with. At 10 feet away, it does an admirable job of looking pretty good, but when you're holding that speaker in your hand and you could feel the sheen and that plasticiness of the vinyl wrap, it's just very disappointing that you actually cannot get a real wood veneer at a $5,500 price point for the 2Cs. Let's add to that, shall we? Well, you have to add speaker stands to it, and you must have the Dali Sound Hub, which luckily comes with the BluOS programming. So, get the speakers into place, and my first hats off to Dali for licensing the BluOS program streaming platform and not coming up with their own in-house proprietary sound system or something that they would have to update on a regular basis as OS and Android products updates. Good on them for just spending the money to license that particular hardware. In practice, as you knew, I just came fresh off of reviewing my Avalon Radian speakers. Just what a wonderful speaker. And I would quickly say that thanks to a newfound audio friend, I will call him Arkansas Phil. Here's a picture of Arkansas Phil's setup. He just bought the Radians from me, and he has an awesome room, very large room. He's got carry amps, a carry SLP03 preamp, tube preamp, very nice system with a topping D90 if I remember off the top of my head. Very aesthetic, the right size room for those kinds of speakers, and Phil is a very happy camper with those Avalons. Glad to see those go to a good home. Thank you, Phil. It's great doing business with you. Having said that, when those speakers were in my sound system, I had the Jeff Rowland M12s connected to them, and I had the NAD C658, a streaming preamp DAC from NAD that I really fell in love with, a great product. With having the BluOS on both the Dali product and the NAD, they both made it easy for me. I could actually go in, and there's a feature where you can transfer control or playback from each device at just a flip of a button. So from my smart device, I was able to have the entire Avalon system going, play a 30-second clip, and then move back to the Dalis and play a 30-second clip. I did this for days with my favorite music, and my poor wife, she was just so tired of the frenetic nature of that review. But I have to say, it made my job a whole lot easier. I didn't have to go out and switch cables. I didn't have to go out and switch amps. All I had to do was hit the button with that BluOS programming. Boom, 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, 30 seconds here. That really gave me the ability to hear the differences and the characteristics of the Rubicon 2Cs in my room against a ginormous Avalon Radian, and consequently I had the Harbeth M30s towards the last 2 weeks before I moved, so I was able to do a little bit of A-Bing there with those speakers against the Rubicons. Now, that's going to come in later. So the Rubicons, for that extra $3,000, you're getting only 1 max dB of maximum output. So the passives are 107 dB output. The active 2Cs are 108 dB output. The weight, when you get the active 2Cs, there's a 250 watt amplifier that's built into the cabinet, and I've taken a lot of shots and video for you all so that you could see what that looks like inside the cabinet itself. It was quite difficult to maneuver that out of the cabinet, and there is no additional bracing. There is no additional reworking of the space within the cabinet. So that big amplifier module that's being fitted into the cabinet is actually taking away airspace from the speaker. Therefore, you have a speaker that actually only weighs 1 pound more than its passive counterpart, has no additional bracing, and it gives you an additional 4 hertz on the low end. So instead of 50 hertz, you're now getting 46 at minus 3 dB. I'm going to be talking a lot about the KEF LS52s and where those would fit as far as just a build, engineering, and price point for these 2Cs. Nevertheless, when listening to the 2Cs, I found that, I will say this right off the bat, this is the best argument for them, and I would say the best accolade that I can give to the Rubicon 2Cs. Up against Radian, up against Avalon speakers, up against Harbeth, they acquitted themselves amazingly when it comes to the detail retrieval department. Those speakers have the uncanny ability to absolutely unearth every little bit of what's in the recording. And those Class D DSP driven driver or amplifiers do a fantastic job of basically, you hear what's on the album. There is no artificiality to it. You're getting what you're getting as far as the album recording goes. Going back and forth with the Avalons, I can tell you that there was no loss of detail between those two speakers, and that's saying a lot for what the Dalis could do. However, that big accolade comes with a Mark McGuire and Barry Bond size asterisk. There is a price to pay for all of that detail retrieval. There's a price to pay for being able to hear everything in that recording. And that is that there is shall we say, an obtrusiveness to the sound projection. The Dali 2Cs are a very forward sounding speaker. To me, against the type of speakers and equipment that I have and what I've listened to over the years, they just have a very forward nature to them. So when I was listening to Tool, and you've got that double bass line going, I will say that energetic type music works really well with the Dalis. It does a great job of infusing those dynamics, and it plays along great to that characteristic. You want hard rock, I would say the Dalis do a really good job of keeping up with that energy and those dynamics. On the other hand, it's kind of interesting if you want to take it back and go a different direction. Johnny Cash, when you're playing Johnny Cash's cover of Hurt, Johnny Cash already has a very deep voice and it projects out. No matter what the scenario is, he has that type of voice that just projects out into the room with that bass tone of his. So the Dalis played really well to that, and it masks what I found with lots of other music to be a very forward mid-bass bump, a very, let's say, I'm going to say this part of it felt artificial to me. The bass line and the bass dynamics of the Dali 2C sounds like a Class D subwoofer. To me, it's not very musical, and it's not very natural. When you're playing particular jazz harmonies, or you're playing, it would take one song, let me say it this way. Those M30 Harbeths in place, it would take one Melody Gardot track to just really understand the natural presentation of a Harbeth speaker or the Avalon Acoustics Radian versus the Dalis. The Dalis they have this force of nature about them. And another way to say it is kind of like that annoying neighbor kid. The Dalis want to tell you how good they are, and they're going to remind you on a regular basis how good they are. Did you like that? Did you like that? Did you hear this dynamism? Did you hear the dynamics? Did you hear how great this detail retrieval is? Oh, how about that bass line? Here's some more. And the Dalis kind of grab you by the back of your hair, show you this nice chocolate cake, and then slam your face right into the chocolate cake. And then you're kind of stunned, and you're just like, whoa, what's going on? Yeah, this tastes really good, but this isn't how I wanted to have my cake. That's the best way I can really kind of convey to you my time with the Dali 2C Rubicons. It goes back to me being a value proposition reviewer. Now, folks, this is where my train station has few writers. There's not a whole lot of folks that like to get off at my train station, and a lot of the big channels, they don't want to touch comparing brand new products to older used pre-owned items. Well, that's my bag of tricks, yo. That's where I play. So I'm going to dive into that. I would say that there was a little bit of serendipity just because of the two other systems that I had on hand at that time. So the Dalis with the Sound Hub and my stands, the metal stands that they were on, ran at about $7,100, mind you. With my Radians, with my Jeff Rowland and the NADC 658, even taking into account all the different cabling that I had with that system up against the Rubicons, the Avalon system was only $500 more as I was able to purchase the pieces and put them together. Then you take the fact that I got really lucky with these Harbeth M30s. I have Balanced Audio Technology VK55SE tube amp with the Balanced Audio Technology VK3iX tubed preamp. Then you add the C658 to that mix. What I paid there and the cabling, was actually the same exact price of what a brand new pair of Rubicon 2Cs would come out to. So when you've got these three systems battling out, those poor little Rubicons, they're just not going to keep up. They are not going to have that natural presentation that the much larger passive speakers are able to convey in my room at that time. However, it's unusual for even me to have that level of gear on hand at the same time as the Rubicon Cs. Anybody else, you're going to put those speakers into your listening space and you're just going to listen to them and you're going to hear that detail and you're going to hear the presentation. And even if you like an aggressive bass, you may absolutely fall in love with those speakers. But me, I like a more natural presentation. I like dynamics. I like there to be energy. It can't be slapping me in the face with every recording that I play. The other issue that I find is that no matter where I placed the Rubicon 2Cs, there was no changing the voicing. So I actually did try to use the Rubicon Cs with just their onboard amp. I took out the Dali Sound Hub and I did a direct RCA connection to both of the speakers through the NADC 658, and I used that to send the preamp signal along with a few other products. And you know what? That Class D DSP amp that's on board with the Rubicons, I could not change the profile characteristic of it whatsoever. No matter if I had the speakers in the room, placed back to the wall. Yes, that messed with the porting a little bit, but at the end of the day, the voice of those active 2Cs, it is what it is. Now with my Harbeths, if I wanted something a little brighter, I could put in a brighter amp. I could put in silver cables. Or with the Radian, Avalon Radians, I could change the amp. I could go from solid state to a tube amp, and there'd be just enough to change the profile of the lushness, or if I needed more top-end detail, or whatever the case is. You can finely tune your system to your particular preferences. The Dali 2Cs, you have to love it or leave it. There's no tuning those, and for $7,000, you're getting what you get. Let's talk about the KEF LS52s for a moment. Here's where I'm really troubled, my fellow audio enthusiasts. Those are $2,800. And it's an all-inclusive package. You don't have to buy a separate sound hub to work with the $2,800 KEFs. Now, at $2,800, the KEFs match the total outputs of the Rubicon Cs at 108 dB. The KEFs at -6 dB also play to 40 Hertz. The KEFs actually weigh more than the Dali 2Cs by almost 4 pounds. That's interesting considering the KEFs are slightly smaller. They're 1 inch shorter and they're roughly 1 inch less deep, but the KEFs are slightly wider in their cabinet. Here's the other interesting thing. The passive LS50s are slightly smaller than the active LS2s. So when you have the LS52s, that means that the KEF engineers knew that they needed to adjust the cabinet to account for the active DSP for the onboard amplifiers, and they changed the back end of the cabinet to account for port tuning and the fact that there's going to be airspace differences with that onboard amplifier. The engineers at Dali didn't do that. They made a lot of compromises to sell you a $7,000 active stand mount speaker. And to make matters worse or harder to swallow, KEF now has the LS60s out, the floor standing speaker that plays down into the 20 Hertz region for $7,000. Guys, I'm a value proposition reviewer. First and foremost, I will tell you if I like it. I will tell you if I think it's a good deal. I absolutely cannot recommend the Rubicon 2Cs at nearly $6,900 with no stands. You can buy KEF LS52s with their matching stands, with the matching subwoofer, and you still have an extra $1,300 in your pocket. That is a way better value proposition than the Rubicon Dali 2Cs, the Dali Rubicon 2Cs. Ooh, ah, ooh, ah, really sorry. I love the other Dalis that I've played with. I really still do love and appreciate the passive Rubicon 2s, but I'm a value proposition guy. Now, I will say this, not to end this review on so much negativity, I will give kudos where kudos belongs. Again, God bless the engineers at Dali for actually just licensing the BluOS programming and hardware. I put out a post a couple of weeks ago that I will not be reviewing the Q Acoustics 400A active speakers. Those speakers absolutely irritated the daylights out of me, and they had proprietary programming where you actually had to download Google Home, and then you had to download their app that did nothing for the speakers, didn't control the speakers at all. And I just had a very frustrating time with those 400A speakers. And I basically just sent them back and said, I refuse to do a review on those speakers. Plus, the other thing I would say is for the wife approval factor, like the KEFs, that Dali Sound Hub, that can go somewhere in a cabinet, it can go on the shelf somewhere. You could plop down those stand mount speakers, and you're not taking up any type of room with a dominating sound system like this. You don't have to have all these pieces that are taking up airspace or they'll look ugly to the wife or your significant other or whatever the case may be. Those Dalis, if you buy them in the piano black or the piano white, look really good in a room, and it doesn't dominate any room. Not to mention, at 108 dB max output, they can fill a very large room, I will say that. A backhanded compliment. If you could buy the Dali Rubicon 2Cs at $3,000 or below, I would say that's a much better value proposition. If you're going to spend more than $3,000, just get the KEFs. That's the best that I can say about that. Before we part, my fellow audio enthusiasts, I do thank you for your time. For the next several months, this channel is going to be all about Harbeth. This audio enthusiast, for many years, I have avoided Harbeth. I am guilty of saying those speakers are too expensive. Even used, those speakers are too expensive. I'm not interested. Well, when a too good to be true deal came up, I took it. When I put these M30s in my room, I was flabbergasted when playing them with the Balanced Audio Technology tube amps. I will say that after that, I immediately made inquiries. I went out and I bought the 7ES 3XDs. And I happened to be working out a little deal with my good friends at the music room in Colorado. I just might have a pair of 5HL Pluses coming in October to add to this. So for a while, if you're a fan of Harbeth, I'm going to do an entire series on the Harbeth family, save for probably the 40.3s. This is too small of a room for such a massive speaker. Having said all that, I do appreciate your time. I do appreciate you coming back to the channel. This is me getting back into it after, oh gosh, it feels like 3 or 4 months. I thank you for the feedback, and practice makes perfect. Let's improve upon these some more, shall we? Thank you so much, everybody. You have a wonderful week.